Oh, welcome back to the channel. I have a fun video for you today. I will somewhat embarrassingly admit that this is the third time I've tried to record this video. I had my audio not well configured the first two times. So fortunately I didn't get the whole like hour and a half deep into the set review before noticing, but I have already been set reviewing for like 15 minutes. So I'm really I'm really deeply in the set review brain already. So welcome to the Canadian Highlander Avatar the Last Airbender set review. This is the last set of 2025. Very exciting. And it's a Universes Beyond set that I actually care about. I really like Avatar, and so a lot of these characters are ones that obviously I have some kind of identification with, and I'm excited to have them be things that I get to play in Magic, I guess. This is just the world we live in now. so, so yeah, this set's interesting. A lot of the theming around this set is based around lessons, and as a result, those are going to be less good in our format that features no sideboards. But with all that being said, there are still a bunch of pretty powerful cards in the set. This is maybe going to be a marginally shorter set review than average, just for that reason. But I've still got a bunch of cards. I've got about 30 cards I want to talk about, so it should still be good. So without further ado, let's get into my categories. So if you've watched any of my set reviews before, you know that I like to break things down kind of broadly by where I think they fit in to the format going forward. And the categories are format staples. These are cards that are gonna make your deck. They're not like right on the fringe last 10 cards that you might cut, might play. These are cards that like solidly get into the mix, and they're maybe not going to be like the best card in your deck or create new archetypes. In some cases they do, but these are cards that like I feel like are definitely going to get played for the next year or so, unless they get power creeped out or the meta changes. But they're cards you're going to very frequently reach for to put in your deck. The next category is playables. These are the cards that I think are kind of like the last 10 cards in your deck. You are maybe going to play some of these. Maybe we're going to try some of these and discover they're not as good as they look on paper. But for me, these are cards that I'm going to be looking to put in decks and evaluate, and we'll see. Some of them are likely going to end up being playable. We're going to end up liking them. And then some of them are going to be kind of like card number 67 a lot of the time, where you'd love to play it if you had infinite slots, but Yorion isn't legal in this format, so you don't. Sorry, Yorion is legal, but companions aren't, so you can't get the benefit. Then we have maybe in one deck, which is these are cards that are kind of similar to playables. They're just more narrow, and so I like splitting those out into their own category because I think it makes more sense to talk about the specific archetype that's going to be interested in these cards rather than clumping them in with the more broadly playable cards that I think have a wider potential application in the format. And then I have, this category is supposed to be I will die to this card, and I have in fact written I will doe to this card, so I might get female deered by these cards. But basically, these are cards that are high power level, but for one reason or another are likely not going to fit in the format. Either they're too low impact, too slow, but they are very strong, and a lot of the times these are cards that I'm aspirationally going to be killing people with, but generally I think that these are also the ones where, you lose to this card and you go and tell your friends after the round that you died to this thing, like that they were playing this thing, and you're a little tilted about it. So without further ado, let's get into the format staples. This is the shortest category of the set review. I do not think that there are very many format staples in this set, but there are a few. So let's start with Wan Shitong, Librarian. This is blue X for a legendary creature bird spirit. It has flash, flying, vigilance. And then it says, when Wan Shitong enters, put X +1/+1 counters on him, then draw half of X cards, round it down. So basically you need to cast it for an even number to get a card. So if you cast it X = 2, you get 1. X = 4, you get 2, etc., etc. And then it says, whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shitong and draw a card. This is one of the more exciting blue hate bears that's been printed in a long time. Blue is not a color that necessarily gets a lot of hate bears. Obviously, Hull Breacher is the big one that I think we usually point to. And this card, I think, is very powerful. The obvious comparison is Archivist of Origami. I actually don't remember the name of it, but it's the like 1/3 white creature that costs 2 mana, has flash, has a similar text box but doesn't grow when an opponent searches a library. And that's a card that you don't really seeing play in Canadian Highlander. It's just too low impact for a variety of reasons. The biggest one being when it's not drawing you cards, like it's pretty close to having a blank piece of cardboard in your deck. Like a 1/3 flash is just very anemic, and although most people are searching their decks, like if you don't get a single trigger off of it, it's just unplayable. And Wan Shi Tong's kind of gets around that by being much more reasonable to cast, even if it's not drawing cards right away. Like if you just cast this X=2 on their end step, it has flash, so it's easier to fit into a blue deck's turns. And if it resolves, you just make a 3/3 flying vigilance. Like that's already just like a very reasonable creature. Obviously, you're not like thrilled. 3/3 flying vigilance that drew you a card, so it's quite good. And like against the combo decks, this is going to be drawing you towards more interaction. Against other fair decks, I mean, fetch lands exist. There are other tutors, and this is one thing that like you kind of just can't leave this in play. It's going to cause problems in the long term. And there are certain decks that this is like really, really absurd into. Like if you look at like a Lance deck that's going to be trying to like recur fetch lands with fast mana. I mean, I guess it is worth noting that this isn't a May, so maybe they can deck you, but you probably find a way to win by the time they've drawn you 50 cards. So yeah, Wan Shi Tong, very, very powerful. For me, the best card in the set. I don't think it's super... The top 2 cards in this set, I think, are much better than the rest. But yeah, great card. Gonna be a great EDH card. I was saying in our group chat that I think this might be the best commander card they've printed in like a half decade as well, which yeah, is unfortunate for the price memory of this card, but yeah, I do think it's going to be very good. And I included this alternate art because I think it's quite nice. I think it's a pretty lovely treatment for this card. So anyway, that's Wan Shi Tong. Next we have Mai Scornful Striker. This is a 1 and a black human noble ally with first strike, and it says whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life, and it's a 2/2. So Mai is great. This is another really, really powerful, hateful effect. The reason that this card is so good is that in my experience, both playing combo and playing against combo, when you have these white hate bears that are restrictive, so say like an Archon of Emeria or Thalia Guardian of Thraben, that are kind of stopping your opponent from winning by basically, sorry, my alarm went off, by basically restricting their ability to play cards at all. What can sometimes happen in those games is if you don't have pressure to back up those hate bears, you can end up in this position where you just lose when they eventually do find the answer to the hate bear. Like you make this 2/2, maybe you make one more creature, but if you don't then have like enough pressure to kind of end the game by turn 4 or 5, if they just find their Swords to Plowshares or their Dress Down or something to turn off your hate bear effects, they just kill you. You just die on the turn after. And the nice thing about Mai is that she's both pressure and she's a hate bear. So like decks like Citadel Storm and Lotus Breach, like they can't go off when this is in play. They will die. I mean, Citadel Storm can try, I guess, but it's quite challenging. And it's going to be taxing them on their way to finding their combo if they don't already have it set up. It's worse against like the Flash Hulks of the world. Like obviously like that deck is only ever really casting one spell and then going off. But, your hate bears are very rarely perfect against every single thing they're trying to hate out. And then the other thing I like about Mai is that she's also just good into the fair matchups. Like if you're playing against a blue-based control deck and you put this into play, I mean, yeah, some of them out of the time they're going to have just like a 1-mana removal spell and they'll kill it and they'll pay 2 life to do so. But if they don't, or if they don't want to, like if you have this backed up by another threat, like maybe you have turn 1 Nethergoyf into turn 2 this, into turn 3 Barrowgoyf or something. It's like, are they really pointing the removal spell at the Mai? I don't think they are. I think they probably have to point their removal spells at the things that are beating them down. And then as a result, if they have to then like cantrip or do whatever, like, this card could end up costing even a fair deck like 4, 6, 8 life without even attacking. So yeah, very high impact. I think this card looks to be quite good. The Black-White Hate Bears deck, I think, is getting better and better. And I also think Rakdos really likes this kind of effect. There are more and more now Hate Bearsy style effects in Black-Red, where I think that deck is going to get to the point where it's actually actively going to start having a positive combo matchup. Like if they print enough of these cards, it currently is the case that you need to find like the really premium bangers like Opposition Agent to win those matchups. But if they start just printing more and more of these that both buy you time, and like this locks out some combo decks, it's very good against some, I think that those decks look poised to get better and better matchups. I also think like your blue-black tempo deck might be interested in this card. The first strike means that it's like a serviceable attacker and blocker, and that deck is also, I think, interested in trying to have other pressure against combo. It is worth noting that this effect is symmetrical, so in those blue decks that I'm talking about, it's maybe a little less exciting, but even then, I think it's still fine. Okay, next we have Zao the Moonslayer. This is 1 and a red for a 2/2 menace with the text non-basic lands enter tapped, and then for 7 generic mana, you can put a Conqueror counter on Zao, and as long as Zao has a Conqueror counter on him, non-basic lands are mountains. So those last 2 lines of text, I think, are flavor text, mostly. But the first 2 lines are very, very good. So we've seen this effect before on 3-mana Thalia, which has seen play, is pretty decent. Like, that's a card that I'm still very happy to sleeve up and put in my white decks. And that card comes down on turn 3. And I will say, like, as someone who has had to play against that card a lot of times, the games where that Thalia came down on turn 2, like with a Mox or maybe in like a green-white deck that had a Mana Dork on turn 1, feel so hard. If your opponent on turn 2 puts an effect like this into play, it is so hamstringing to your mana often. It makes fetch lands like just atrociously bad, and it makes all lands much, much slower to develop. So yeah, I think this card, again, kind of fits in this kind of like red-black Rakdos-y Hate Bear shell that I'm envisioning. I think that like decks like Rakdos are going to be very happy to put this card in your deck. Similarly, like Mono Red is gonna play this card really, really happily as well. They have kind of historically been a deck that's been looking for more disruptive pieces, and the successful mono red decks have started to lean more and more on playing some actual disruption instead of being all in on just trying to burn you out as fast as possible. And so, yeah, I think this card will be quite good. And the Menace is a very reasonable additional kind of like French vanilla keyword, right? This does mean that this creature is going to get in for quite a while. It's not going to get stonewalled despite being a 2/2, just like Mai, where the first strike means that she holds equipment pretty well. I think Zao also holds equipment quite well, which is non-trivial. This is also a non-symmetrical effect, but I kind of like that. Again, it means that you can't just jam this into everything, but it's going to, I think, be especially good in like mono red with a light splash, or, you know, maybe the Boros Taxes decks are willing to reach for an effect like this. I don't know if they themselves want their lands taxed to that degree, because they actually don't play that many basics. But yeah, very cool. I'm always interested in more non-basic land hate things that are going to make it harder to play kind of 4-color soup, and this is the right kind of effect. And I guess technically, if you ever get to 7, you can also Blood Moon your opponent. Although interestingly, like then their lands come into play untapped, so maybe it's not even that good. I'm not sure. But yeah, so these are the 3 format staples for me from this set. Everything else, I think, I got to think about more about whether or not I'm really going to put it in my deck or not. But these 3 cards, I think, are very good, very powerful, and I think they're a pretty significant cut above the rest. So next we have playables. I'm just going to move myself. I finally thought ahead and structured my PowerPoint in a way where I could actually have my own face be featured on the slideshow a bit more heavily. Oh no, and now I've resized wrong. All right. There we are. It's me next to Badger Mole Cub. So this is 1 and a green for a 2/2 that says when this creature enters Earthbend 1. This is our first mention of Earthbending. So Earthbend says target land you can control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste. That's still a land. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies or is exiled, return it to the battlefield tapped. So Earthbend 1 makes a 1/1. If you had something that Earthbended for 2, it would make a 2/2. Is the short version of how that keyword works. And then Badger Mole Cub says, when you tap a creature for mana, add an additional green. So I think this card is interesting. I do think that the kind of decks that would want this kind of effect are sort of a product of a bygone era of Canadian Highlander. Like, obviously, this card sounds great in say like your Cradle Hoofs of the world. This is going to come into play, and it basically makes it makes one of your lands tap for an extra mana. It also makes any other mana dorks cast tap for 2 mana immediately, which is great. Like if you go dork into this thing, you get 2 mana out of your dork right away, which seems very, very reasonable. But those decks aren't very good right now. And so I have a hard time exactly placing where this card should go. It's obviously very powerful. It's not an issue of the power level with this card. It's more an issue of, do the strategies that this card synergizes with actually have a place in the format right now? And I'm not sure. So I have this in the playables category. I think it is playable. I think if you are someone who likes playing like Cradle Hoof, or if you like playing like the creature combo decks with a bunch of mana dorks, I think you're going to play this card. I don't see why you wouldn't. But for me personally, I don't know that I think those decks are in an especially good place currently, so I don't have this one rated higher as a result. Next, we have Aang's Iceberg. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment with flash. It says when this enchantment enters, exile up to one other target non-land permanent until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. And then with Waterbend 3, so this is waterbending. This is our first seeing of this. Waterbending says while paying a waterbending cost, you can tap artifacts and creatures to help you. So it's basically like Convoke meets what's the artifact one? Anyway, you can both Convoke it and use artifacts at the same time. So very exciting. So for 3, you can sacrifice this enchantment. If you do, scry 2. I have this here. They keep printing newer and newer versions of this kind of like rare O-ring that is O-ring plus. Like it's better than Oblivion Ring in some way or the other. And the keyword they've chosen for this one is flash. And I do think that might be enough to push it over the top. So having an enchantment that removes anything is definitely something that many decks are interested in. The 3 mana is a real deterrent for the cost. But having flash means that this is all of a sudden a lot easier, I think, to fit into a turn. You don't have to tap out for your removal spell. You can like make a decision in combat whether you're going to remove something or not, and I do think that's better. Like, if blue-white control was still playable, they would be thrilled about having access to this card. And again, that's another deck that's kind of been left by the wayside, but I do think this card is powerful enough that it's going to be one that I'm at least thinking about. And like I said, when I was talking about this category, like these are cards that I kind of envision are going to be like in the last 10 cards in your deck, and maybe they get cut and maybe we discover they're good. And this is one that I kind of feel like is sneaky good. I know there are very different takes on the power of flexible removal, but for me, where this hits everything, I think that really helps. And also having flash means that this can go after things that a lot of other effects like this are dead against. So like, for example, this card is all of a sudden playable against like Citadel Storm. It's playable against Breach. It's playable against Paradox Academy. It's playable against Time Vault, because even if they assemble the whole combo on one turn, you can still put this into play and exile something in response. So yeah, flash for me, I think, is the keyword that puts an effect like this over the edge of being something I'm at least going to try to include. And I don't know, maybe it's bad, but I'm excited to try it. Okay, next we have Desperate Plea. These are Jumpstart cards, if you're wondering why the set icon has changed. I think I've included every card from the set. It was actually kind of challenging to find like complete spoilers for everything all in one place, but I think I got there. So this is Desperate Plea. This is 1 and a black for a sorcery lesson. I think this is the only lesson on the list, but yeah, this says as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, and then it has the effect to choose one or both. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield if its power is less than or equal to the sacrificed creature, and destroy a creature. And I think it's the both that makes this card interesting. There are going to be a decent number of black decks that are just going to churn through their deck and have creatures in the graveyard anyway. They'd either have ETBs or have kind of sneaky, have like sneaky power potentially. Like if you're doing stuff with like Barrowgoyf or another Goyf, you can kind of like manipulate what their power is, so that they are smaller when you return them, and then maybe you put some more stuff in the bin and they get bigger again. And it also removes a thing, which I think is the big deal here. So this card is actually like generating value and generating board position, which I think is pretty good. So I'm pretty excited about this card, and maybe this should be one category down, because the big place where this card is exciting, and Jared was very excited about it, is Aristocrats. This is like a very juiced Aristocrats card, exactly what that kind of deck wants to do. It's a sack outlet, it gets back a Blood Artist or something really premium that maybe has died in a setup turn, and it removes a creature on your opponent's side, so you can just cast it for value at other times too. So yeah, Desperate Plea seems pretty good. I think that it doesn't fit in every deck by any means, but I think there are a lot of decks that are going to reach for this one and at least try it and try and find ways to break it. Fire Nation Occupation is my pick for my favorite card from this set. I don't think that it's like unbeatable or that it's going to be meta warping, but I think it's very cool. So it's 2 and a black, and it says when this enchantment enters, create a 2/2 red soldier token with Firebending 1. Firebending, this is our first mention of Firebending, and I think I have one of each bending type in the set review. I might not have an airbending card, actually. So Firebending says when it attacks, add red mana. This red mana equal to the number of Firebending, so in this case it's just a single red. And it says this mana lasts until end of combat. Then it says whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, create a 2/2 red creature token with Firebending 1. So 3 mana do nothing enchantments are not playable, and that is historically been the kind of end of conversation with cards like this, where you're like, wow, imagine what you could do when you untap with this thing, and the reality is you won't untap, you will die, it will be bad. But this is not a 3 mana do nothing enchantment. This is a 3 mana make a 2/2 enchantment. And I kind of joked with people at our group chat. I said 3 mana do very little may be playable, as opposed to 3 mana do nothing. And the 2/2 is like not incredible, right? Like you would not pay 3 mana for a 2/2 with Firebending 1 under any circumstances. That's not playable. However, I think that in like blue-black tempo or some of these other like blue-black based decks, if you can put this into play on turn 3, or maybe later, maybe you wait till you have a higher mana value, mana count, like you have 5, and you put this in play and you hold up 2 mana. I think if you get to make like 2 or 3 tokens, this card is starting to feel very good. And this card also just makes it so that like you have this weird inevitability. Like you're going to construct your deck in a way that you're going to be able to cast spells on your opponent's turn. And it turns into this like kind of sub game of like, well, they just have to deal with the 2/2s eventually. Like, it's not an incredible creature by itself. But if you're making 1 or 2 2/2s every couple of turn cycles, like that kind of thing adds up in their grindier matchups. And the nice thing is that against, say, like the combo decks of the world, this allows you to build pressure while also interacting if your interaction happens to be like removal or counter spells or things like that. So yeah, Fire Nation Occupation, very cool, very interesting card. I'm not certain it's great, but I am certain I'm going to try to play it a bunch. I think this is top of my list of I'm going to try and build a deck with this card. Next, we have Spirit Water Revival. This is 1 blue for a sorcery. It has, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may waterbend 6. And then it says, draw 2 cards. If this spell's additional cost was paid, instead shuffle your graveyard into your library, draw 7, and you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And then it says, exile Spirit Water Revival. So this is, I think, mostly like a High Tide Paradox Academy card. It's basically like the big mana combo decks are interested in this. They like the fact they have increasingly been reaching for draw 7s that are asymmetrical, even if they're more expensive. And this is one of the better ones of these effects that's been printed in a while. Like, especially in Paradox Academy, I think it's reasonable to think that that 9 cost is not actually 9. You can probably get it down because you're going to have a couple of random artifacts that don't make mana that you're going to have generated through other means. So this card's, I think, pretty interesting. I think it's nice that it has the floor of being slightly harder to cast divination, but that the ceiling is asymmetrical draw 7, right? Like the floor ceiling calculation there works out pretty well for a lot of the combo decks. So I expect you'll see this one being at least trialed in a lot of these big mana combo decks, and maybe they don't end up settling on it. Maybe the 9 is too much to pay, but I'm certainly planning to try it in High Tide. I'm not convinced yet, but I'm intrigued at least. I could be convinced. Next, we have Firebending Student. This is a 1 red for a human monk. It's a 1/2 with prowess, and it has Firebending X, where X is this creature's power. So I like this card in mono red. Not that that deck is like especially powerful, but I think that it's pretty exciting. The Firebending effect is, for me, going to be the hardest one to evaluate, because I think in our format, you are not often going to, well, I mean, often is not the right word. I think you are going to have trouble spending the mana some amount of the time. And that's okay. I don't think that you always need to spend the mana for the card to be worth it. Like, a lot of the times, these cards have been statted with Firebending in mind. And this is one of those examples. But I also just think that, like, 1 and a red for a prowess creature that is potentially going to let you have, like, some pretty big swing turns is pretty good in these mono red decks. Like, if you play this on 2, and then on your next turn you go play a non-creature spell to maybe remove a blocker, play another creature that has haste, attack, make 2 mana with Firebending Student, play another burn spell in combat. I mean, that's going to be very potent. And the real question is going to be, I think, with cards like this, is like, you're going to run out of cards, and if you haven't won the game, it's going to be maybe problematic. But I think that this effect is powerful enough, and I also just think we are getting to the point now where there are enough prowess creatures that, like, eventually that blue-red prowess deck, I think, is going to reach a level of consistency that it has not yet been able to get to. And this is another one that I think that style of deck would be quite fond of. Okay, moving on. We have the Mechanist, Aerial Artisan. This is 2 and a blue for a human artificer ally. It says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a clue token, and then has the effect tap until end of turn. Target artifact creature you control becomes a 3/1 construct artifact creature with flying. So the tap effect, I think, is fine. I think that this could come up from time to time as a way to, like, fight for like a monarch or an initiative token, which is pretty reasonable. For me, I see this card more as a combo card. I think that we know that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, make material is playable. Like Sai Master Thopterist is a card we're usually pretty happy to play. Similarly, the Inspector from Murders at Karlov Manor is another one that we're pretty happy to play. And boy, if you could assemble both of them, both the Mechanist and that Inspector, you would be pretty happy, I think. I think the jury is out as to whether or not this second ability is enough for this card to make it into your deck. Because when you think about the other effects like this, Sai is making creatures that can block and keep you alive. And God, I should know the name of the one from Karlov Manor, but that one reduces the cost of activated abilities. So clues sack for 1, which is a big deal, I think. So I don't know. We'll see. I think that it is reasonable to think that this card is going to get into some of these artifact combo decks and maybe some other just general artifact decks as well. Like maybe Affinity is willing to play this card just because you also are looking for ways to generate more tokens. Those decks tend to be a little bit low on non-creature spells, but not 0. Like, it's still fine potentially. So yeah, I think this card is like very solidly in this category of like, it's either going to be like, you know, one of the last 5 cards that you include or cut, or it's not going to be playable at all. But I do think this text box is powerful. Okay. Coffee sip down. Very good. Charging up. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked on this set, I would say broadly. Next, we have Foggy Swamp Visions. This is 1 black for a sorcery that says, as an additional cost to cast the spell, Waterbend X. And then it says, exile X target creatures from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, create a token that's a copy of it. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice these tokens. Okay, hear me out. I think this card might actually be good in kind of like creature combo decks, or if you're trying to do like aristocracy things. It sounds kind of interesting to me. This card is probably in the wrong category. I put it in playables. This is probably a maybe in one deck, or I will die to this card. But I'm manifesting, I guess, to an extent with this one. This effect, just like when I read it, I was like, this is such an interesting and unique effect. Now, obviously, you don't get, the cards don't get haste, which matters. And you only are really going to get like a powerful ETB, but there are some pretty powerful ETBs these days, right? Like, I was sort of thinking like about like that Bug Seeker Smog deck that I played a little while ago. Like this could be kind of interesting in a shell like that, where you potentially get to reload after a grindy game. You have like 5 or 6 mana in play, bunch of creatures in the bin that assemble a combo between them, and you can like, you know, exile all 3 of them and go for the win again. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too aspirational with this one, but I think this card is very interesting. I don't know if I see it having enough fair applications. It's not nothing that you can also just use this as some graveyard hate, but I think it is too expensive to fit that role. But it's just a very cool card. I don't know, man. It's just interesting. You get to like exile your opponent's Flage, lightning helix them with it, and it's gone forever. Like, that sounds good. Doesn't that sound good? Like, that sounds so reasonable. I don't know. Foggy Swamp Visions is probably the one that I think is going to be the highest variance. Either we're going to be back in 3 months being like, oh, was playing this game against Seeker Walk, and then they drew the Foggy Swamp Visions and I died, or we're going to never talk about this card again. But I think it's cool. Okay, next we have Raven Eagle. This is 2 and a black for a bird assassin. Great type line. Big fan. For a flying 2/3, it has the effect: whenever this creature enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target creature from a graveyard. Exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If a creature card is exiled this way, create a clue token. And then it says, whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is kind of in the same style as the Trespasser, which we often see play in like the black-red, green-black kind of decks. And I do think this kind of like passive graveyard hate is very good. One thing we've learned over the years with Canadian Highlander is that like there's almost no such thing as too much graveyard hate. Like every deck at this point cares about its graveyard for some reason or another. And the fact that this gets to make clues if you're eating creatures is awesome. Actively very good. These kind of black aggro decks often kind of run out of gas, and this is a way to mitigate that effect or that issue. So yeah, Raven Eagle seems pretty cool. I think that it is a bit more narrow than a lot of the other cards we've talked about so far in terms of the kind of like black and red aggro cards, but I think it's cool. And I think you'll likely see it seeing play, particularly in like decks that are playing both green and black. Like if you can get this into play on turn 2, you're going to be pretty happy, I think. And the fact that it can enter and make a clue token right away really increases its value in fair matchups, in my opinion. It means that like kind of no matter what, even if they immediately remove it, you've gotten value out of it. And then the drain effect is unlikely to come up super often, I think, but it's kind of just bonus. It's nice extra. So yeah, Raven Eagle, very good. Buy winner for best type line of the set as well. Bird Assassin is undefeated, and the effect is pretty good too. So yeah, sweet card. I think this one looks to be probably playable. I think that you're gonna see this card pop up in decks more often than you would expect, I think. Okay, now we have my Jaded Edge. This is the next my. The one issue with the Avatar set is that, kind of similar to the Spider-Man set, there's only so many characters, so they appear repeatedly. So this Mai is 1 in a red for a human noble. She's a 1/3 with prowess and exhaust 3, which is just an effect you can only do once. Put a double strike counter on Mai. Pretty good. Double striking prowess creatures are obviously things that we're interested in. You don't want to pay 5 for that effect, but maybe paying it broken up over 2 turns is more reasonable. I think this one, again, it's like they just keep printing these 2 mana prowess threats, which is great. You're obviously interested in that every time they do it. Mono Red seems pretty happy about this card. And I think that it's kind of interesting. Like, this seems like a marginal upgrade to some of the other potential 2-drop options because it has the ability to mana sink away some excess mana to become a more potent attacker. So yeah, I don't have a ton of notes on this one. I think it should be interesting. Could be too low impact by itself, but we'll see. Okay, next we have Aang, Swift Savior. This is a transform card, so I had to put both sides. So this is a 1 white and a blue 2/3 with flash and flying. And it says, when Aang enters, airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. Excellent. Okay, so I have all 4 bending types represented in the set review. So airbending is exile the thing that you airbend, and then while it's exiled, its owner may cast it for 2 rather than paying its mana cost. So you basically like forcibly foretell a card and make it have foretell cost too. Then Aang has Waterbend 8, transform Aang, and you transform into Aang and La, Ocean's Fury. This is a 5/5 with reach and trample, and whenever it attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on each tapped creature you control, including itself. So the obvious like comparison for this card is Aven Interrupter, like the 1 white flying 2/2 that plots an opponent's card and makes exile cards cost 2 more to cast. And if you ever assemble both of these, I think you are going to be chilling. You are going to be in the driver's seat for sure. But yeah, this seems pretty reasonable. The fact that this hits a creature on the board as well to kind of clear it away in the short term is decent. You're not going to be super happy to airbend a bunch of your opponent's creatures because they do get to recur the ETB, and there are some of those that I think are going to be problematic. But the fact that this blocks spells is the real the real like nice part of this card. A 2/3 flyer that tempos a spell, has a mana sink upside. I don't think it's likely to come up tremendously often that you transform Aang, but you can, and that's not nothing. Is pretty interesting, and I think this card is pretty sweet. Obviously, like that blue-white tempo deck that I've been playing a little bit loves to see more cards like this. This is exactly the style of card that deck wants to be playing. And so I would expect you'll see this crop up. It's not going to be a metagame staple necessarily, I don't think, but I think that there's going to be a decent number of decks that, are going to be doing enough things that this card does pretty well that they're going to reach for it. There's been a decent number of kind of like flash flicker decks cropping up, like Trent played Esper Blink in the most recent MTGO monthly, and this card like is maybe interesting in that deck where you can like evoke Solitude, Aang it afterwards, and then cast it for 2 mana. Like that sounds pretty good for like you get like 5 mana double Solitude and you get to keep the Solitude. That seems decent. So I don't know. There's definitely some interesting stuff with Aang. Okay, this I think is my last slide of the playables, and I've just put 2 of the lands here. There are 5 of these. This is a whole cycle. So they printed lands in this set that enter tapped unless you control a basic, which is interesting templating. They're really trying to incentivize more 2-color mana bases, I think, which I respect. I would like for there to be more incentives to be 2-color and not just 3 and 4-color soup. The effects on these cards are interesting. So I'll just read the 2 that I have here. This is Agna Kela. This is a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land. It adds blue, and then it has the ability to, and a blue, tap, draw a card, then discard a card. I think this is decent. It's maybe a little expensive, but if you are a mono blue deck that isn't High Tide, because a High Tide will not play non-islands, but if you're a mono blue deck, I could definitely see you reaching for this, like, or even a 2-color deck where you think this is going to come into play on tapped often enough. I don't know. It's not incredible, like, to loot for 3 mana, but at the same time, like, if you have the slots, I think this is a low enough deck building cost that you're willing to try it. The other one that I have posted here, I put the 2 best ones here, I think, in my opinion, is Abandoned Air Temple. This one is the white version, so it enters tapped unless you control a basic land. It makes a white mana, and for 3 and a white, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Now, this to me is the more exciting one, because this being in play kind of like does more to frustrate your opponent's combat math. If you're playing like a go wide tokens deck in particular, these sorts of Anthem effects are obviously very desirable. So this is one I could see seeing a bit more play, certainly in like the green white tokens deck that we've talked, or green white +1/+1 counters deck that we've talked about as well. Like that's a deck that's playing a bunch of basics, and this slots very favorably into that kind of right away. These are basically like they're the same effects as the colorless lands from Innistrad. Like if you look at these, they're like basically Desolate Lighthouse and a Gavany Township for cheaper costs, and they're on a land that actually makes colored mana, which is relevant, I think. So yeah, I don't know where I land on these lands. The green one makes it earthbends for 2. The red one gives a creature firebending 4 for 3 mana, which is like kind of interesting, but again, probably not good enough. And the black one makes a 1/1 spirit for 4, but it's a spirit that can't attack or block. So neither of those 3 sounded particularly enticing to me, but these 2 are, I think, the closest to being playable. And if you're in a 2-color deck, I think you're supposed to play these. I think that the deck building cost is low enough and the upside is high enough that it's worth it, but it might be that these are just worse than a basic because they potentially come into play tapped. Oh, no, okay, I do have a couple more. I lied, I moved some cards. So this is Diligent Zookeeper. This is 3 and a green for a human citizen ally. It's a 4/4. It says each non-human creature you control gets +1/+1 for each of its creature types to a maximum of 10. So I included this one. I was on the fence about where this one belonged, whether it should be in the playables or in the I will definitely die to this card, or maybe in one deck. Basically, this text box is pretty good. Like, most of the creatures that you're going to be playing that are non-human are probably going to have minimum 2 creature types. Some of them are going to have more. And so as a result, like, this is just at least, I think the floor on this card is that it's a +2/+2 Anthem, and that you can build your deck in a way that it's better than that. I don't know if that makes it playable. Like, the shell that I was thinking about it in is like, I do think that this is quite a good Winota hit. Like, if you hit this one off Winota, like, all of a sudden your Winota attack is probably just winning the game, I have to think. Like, if you look at, like, say, like, the Goblin Shaman token from Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, like, all of a sudden that's a 4/4. Like, it does just sound good. The issue with this card, obviously, is like it does cost 4. It is itself a 4/4 though, so it's not a completely irrelevant attacker or blocker. I don't know. I don't think this card is good, and maybe it should be one category down. But it is an intriguing text box to me, and it's one that I think maybe someone smarter than me finds a good shell for. Notably, an interesting Merfolk card. If that's a dream you're chasing, you're playing like blue-green Merfolk. I do think that this is one of those ones where you play this on 4 and your Merfolk, most of which have at least 2 type lines, Merfolk plus like Wizard or whatever, likely then subsequently get in for a million damage and your opponent dies. So that could be an interesting place for it. But yeah, I'm intrigued. I basically is what I'm trying to say. Like, I think this card has a high enough floor that I could see it being something that you're willing to give a shot. Next, we have Shared Roots. This is a 1 and a green lesson. It says search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So I have this one in the playables instead of the maybe in one deck, because I think there is a subset of decks that are very interested in having turn 1 land ramp. The biggest one is obviously Escape Shift. That's the really obvious thing that this goes into. But then there's also like Curb Your Enthusiasm, like the Time Walk decks. There's Simic Slaw, the kind of big blue-green deck, blue-green little X, like typically they splash on either white or black for some removal. And at least in Escape Shift, the games where you have turn 2 land ramp and the games where you don't are so different that I think that deck would play like 12 or 13 of this effect. And currently there's not that many. So you would put this one in as well, I think. It's just so different. The games where you go turn 2 ramp and then turn 2/3 ramp, like either with one of the 4-mana ramp spells or maybe like 2-mana ramp spells. They are just fundamentally, the velocity of those games is so much higher that this card is worth including in this list for that reason alone. Is it like the best card they've ever printed? No, but it's just another uniquely named Rampant Growth, and as a result, Scapeshift is pretty excited, I would say. Okay, so now we've hit the maybe in one deck category. I think that maybe that last slide was also maybe in one deck. I don't know, but now we're decidedly in maybe in one deck. So here we've got Great Divide Guide. This is 1 and a green for a 2/3 human scout ally that says each land and ally you control has tap, add 1 mana of any color. I don't think this effect is good enough, but like, can I just say, when did we start like typing like Tree of Paradise as a 2/3? Like, when did these creatures start being allowed to have power and toughness? What is going on? So like, this is basically like, it's a good mana fixer. It seems fine, but I don't see it as being especially likely to see a ton of play. But again, like, I think that there's maybe like an amulet deck or something that wants to have its lands tap for any color, something like that. Or maybe there is like some kind of allies deck. They printed a lot of allies batters cards in this set. I haven't covered very many of them, but maybe we break out the original Zendikar allies too, and we put something together. But it's mostly just like, I think this is just a reasonable stat line to put on a 2-mana Rainbow Dork, and as a result, like, I think you might just play it because it's just decent in terms of its stat line. Like, obviously people play Biophagus, which is a 1/1, and that gives a +1/+1 counters to creatures that it casts, which is good, but it is a fundamentally extremely fragile creature. And the third toughness in particular, I think, is a real kind of a breakpoint for creatures having the ability to have actual tangible game impact as attackers and blockers. So yeah, kind of crazy. I'm I don't know when they started statting mana dorks like this, but they did. So this one I think is a maybe. Curderhoof is probably interested in this. There are maybe some other decks that want more Rainbow Dorks. It does cost 2, but it's got a good stat line, so who knows. Next, we have the Earth King. This is 3 and a green for a human noble ally. It says when the Earth King enters, create a 4/4 green bear creature token, and whenever one or more creatures you control with power 4 or greater attacks, search your library for up to that many basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So this is, I think, a kind of interesting card in like maybe like green-red monsters. This is like sort of a card that doesn't have a home, again, which is why I have it in like the maybe in one deck category, because I think that someone's going to look at this and be really excited. I don't know that it's me, but like, this is a pretty powerful effect. Like, it's not that hard to put a 4 power creature into play with 3 mana, and then play this on 4 mana and immediately attack and get a basic land, regardless of whether they have blockers or not. Which I think is the reason why this card is like is interesting at all, is the fact that like, it's not on damage, so like, it's not like they can chump block away you getting your lands. But like, what deck is going to have that many basic lands? I don't know. Like, is there a green-red monsters deck that goes bigger? Typically, I think right now monsters tends to curve out around 5, but like, is there maybe some kind of shell that plays into the ramp strategy a bit more and maybe tries to go like 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7? Like, are we trying to go all the way up to 7? There's been some good 7 drops printed lately. Like, that feels like something we could consider. But yeah, this is a card that has like interesting text. I think it's a bit without a home currently, but I could see it finding a home eventually. Okay, next we have Sandbender Scavengers. These are human rogues. They're 1/1s. They cost white and a black, and they say whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And then it says when this creature dies, you may exile it. When you do, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to this creature's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is an Aristocrats card. It seems quite good to me. You can either use it as an outlet for your sacking if you think it's going to have a clear attack, or you can just, use it as part of the combo train where you sack a bunch of things, then you sack this, get back something that's going to make multiple bodies, go again, that kind of thing. It does only get to do it once because it has to exile itself, but I think that that's still something that the black-white Aristocrats deck is probably interested in. The Aristocrats deck at this point, like, it feels like every set there's like 4 or 5 cards. We're like, is this an Aristocrats card? And yeah, that deck is always going to struggle from the same problem, which is that it's very good against the fair decks and very bad against the unfair decks. But this is yet another card that pushes it further in that very diametrically opposed direction. So if you feel like you have a good spot for it and you're playing in a meta game where Aristocrats looks good, I mean, here's another card to add to your deck. Dragonfly Swarm is 1 blue-red for a dragon insect. Also pretty good stat line. It has flying and ward 1. And then it says the effect, this creature's power is equal to the number of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard. And then it says when this creature dies, if there's a lesson card in your graveyard, draw a card. And it's a star 3, so has 3 toughness. So I just flagged this one. I mean, like, this is just another in the Spellheart Chimera family of creatures. And historically, those have not been playable cards in the format. Not for a long time, at least. There used to be kind of blue-red spells decks that did play them. I flagged this one because I do think Ward 1 is a pretty meaningful upgrade. The more I've played, at least, the more I've felt like Ward has pretty substantial impacts on the tempo of how turns work. And in particular, one of the weaknesses of these style cards historically has been they don't generate value immediately. Like the 4 mana one, something Drake, draws a card when it enters. And so that one's like more playable in some ways. It also counts cards in exile, which matters as well. And then there's another one that people have played before that has 4 toughness. And there's the Djinn, the 1 blue Djinn that makes everything cost -1, makes your instants and sorceries cheaper to cast. Like, these are all ones that I think are easier to consider. Haughty Djinn, that's the one, that are easier to consider playing. And I don't know, this is another effect that I think is pretty decent. Like, we're now getting up there in terms of how many cards with this text box that have enough extra text on them that maybe they're worth playing. Like with Spellheart Chimera, I can tell you because I tried to play it. You'd play it, it would get bolted, you would cry. With this, it's like all of a sudden the 1 mana removal is 2 mana removal, which can break up a turn, give you more of a chance to do some more setting up. I think it's just like worth thinking about. I'm not certain it's great by any means, but it's interesting. And I guess maybe there's a world where you could fit lessons in your deck to draw a card, but I think that is mostly a keyword that's going to come up in limited and nowhere else. But I wanted to flag this one. Like, there are blue-red spells decks. People play them. There are these kind of spellslinger decks, and this is a card that I think of these kinds of effects. I mean, Ward 1 is a really nice text box to have. Okay, next we have the last Agni Kai. This is 1 in a red for an instant. It says target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls. If the creature the opponent controls is dealt excess damage this way, add that much red. Until end of turn, you don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. So this card, I think, is going to be really interesting in Standard/Draft, where it lets you turn your Firebenders into, like, mana dorks, and you get to do some wacky stuff, and I could see it being good in that regard. For us, I think that this is, like, maybe a kind of interesting, like, green-red monsters card, where, like, on 4 mana, potentially, you can use this to fight your big thing into something smaller on their side, and maybe this gets to act as a removal spell that is also mana positive, like, not even mana neutral, but mana positive. And the fact you don't have to spend the mana right away is quite nice. It also makes combat kind of a mess for your opponent. So, I don't know. I think this is, again, a card that is potentially without a home. Like, the green-red monsters deck I'm talking about is probably kind of interested in playing a card like this. But I'm not sure. But it is interesting. I think it remains to be seen how much making extra mana is going to matter. And it's part of what is making evaluating firebending hard for me. I think until I actually get the cards in my digital hands, because I mostly play online, but until I actually play with them, I think it's going to be a bit challenging for me to evaluate how important it is to get that bonus mana. But it sounds decent, to be honest with you, and that's why I put it in this section to at least talk about. Next, we have the Fire Nation Drill. This is 2 black for a legendary artifact vehicle. It has trample. It says, when the Fire Nation Drill enters, you may tap it. When you do, destroy target creature with power 4 or less. It has the ability 1. You pay 1, and permanents your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. And you can crew it for 2, and it's a 6/3 vehicle. So this is kind of an interesting removal option for the affinity style decks in particular. I think it's not going to kill everything, which is obviously like a little disappointing, but it does kill anything, even if it has hexproof or indestructible. Like, you can even activate the ability when this ability is on the stack, which is pretty interesting, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I see myself reaching for this potentially in like the kind of like Grixis affinity deck. That's a deck that likes having its removal spells secretly be artifacts as well, but does want to play removal spells. And crew 2 to become a 6/3, like, that's going to clock people pretty quickly. So I included this one. I think it's maybe an affinity card. Maybe it's not. We'll see, but I do like it. Okay, last we have Invasion Reinforcements. This is 1 and a white for a human warrior ally with flash. And then when this creature enters, create a 1/1 white ally creature token, and it itself is a 1/1. So this is another, like, in the long line of Raise the Alarms. We have learned historically that the ones that are actually creatures with an extra body stapled to them are like playable and reasonable as well. There's no reason why they wouldn't be. So yeah, this one is fine. Like, it's kind of the same story as all of these. Like, there are token stacks that want to have access to Raise the Alarms because they use them to fight for emblems, and this is another one in a long line of those effects. So I imagine you will see people playing this one, but it's pretty limited in its scope. Next, we have Soka Bold Boomeranger. This is blue and a red for a human warrior ally. When Soka enters, discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards, and then whenever you cast an artifact or lesson spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Soka, and Soka is a 1/1. So the fact that you can kind of like filter through your draw a little bit when you play this is nice. I have this included here because, again, I'm kind of like thinking, like, is this one of these cards that maybe goes into these like affinity aggro style decks? I don't know. Your slots for playing non-artifacts in those decks are really, really taxed already, and I'm not convinced this is one that's good enough to get in there. But maybe it is. Maybe the kind of faithless looting style effect is enough, where you want to be able to get rid of the bad cards, and you can grow this into a reasonable sized threat pretty quickly. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. Maybe in like the Jeskai affinity decks that are planning to have more reach with burn spells, like, this is maybe interesting because you can kind of draw towards that reach faster. But I'm not like super sold on this card by any means, but I don't think it's terrible. Okay, and so now we're on the now appropriately titled. Oh, I know I got to move again. I will definitely die to this. So there's only a couple of cards in this list. I have fewer in this list than the other categories. Whoops, spoilers. So first we have the Tale of Katara and Toph. This is a 3 mana, it's 2 and a green for an enchantment that says creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped for the first time during each of your turns, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is a 3 mana do nothing enchantment, sort of. I mean, you play it, and if you get to tap things for mana or attack the turn it enters, they get +1/+1 counters, which does sound good. But it's unclear to me whether this is going to come up enough to be meaningful. It does seem like a pretty exciting green-white counters card, like, especially if you can start to double up these counters. That's starting to look pretty potent and effective, but I didn't think that it got to the point of potentially being a playable. I think this one is a little bit too dirtily to be super, super effective. Next, we have Jet, Rebel Leader. This is 3 and a white for a human rebel ally. Whenever Jet attacks, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. A very powerful text box. Only looking at the top 5 means that you're going to need to have a decently high density of hits for this to feel good. But man, like when this hits, it's going to feel great. I think the fact that it's a 4 mana legend that doesn't have an ETB means that you're not allowed to play it. I think that means you're not allowed to play it, but I hope I'm wrong and that this card is secretly cool. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm at with Jet. It's a very powerful text box. The stat line on this card is maybe a touch low, and the density of cards you need to play in your deck to hit often enough, I think, is maybe a touch high. But if I'm wrong, this card could be cool. Okay, next we have Katara, Waterbending Master. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary creature human warrior ally. This says, whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, you get an experience counter, and whenever Katara attacks, you may draw a card for each experience counter you have. If you do, discard a card. So I think in Canadian Highlander, this is too aspirational, right? Like the dream is you put this in play and then you cast a spell and you play this, you force their spell, you get an experience counter. Then you untap, you attack, you get to loot. Then they play another spell, you counterspell it. And now when Katara attacks, you draw 2, discard 1, and you start to run away with the game. And I think in practice, that's not going to happen very much. It is worth noting that this is the first time in a while they've printed cards that have experience counter as the set as a mechanic, and there are starting to be enough random cards with experience counters that you're going to start to have decks that have more than one card or where you could play more than one card that gets to care about having experience. And you're not at a point yet where like it's a synergy that you could really build around. But it's like not for nothing that like if you built a deck with Katara and Othari, for example, that you could like play Katara, use her to generate 1 or 2 experience token counters, and then on your 5 mana turn, like play Othari and attack for like 9. Like that's something that I kind of like am dreaming of in Magical Christmas Land. I don't think it's especially likely to happen, but I do think if it did, it would be cool. Yeah, I think it's just too low impact. The stat line is just too low impact. But I'd love to be proven wrong about this card. And I will say that like if your opponent plays this and you don't have an answer for it, and then they do get to like double counterspell you or something, like you are going to feel like the game is immediately unwinnable if they get to attack with this even like once or twice probably. Next we have Waterbender's Restoration. This is blue for an instant lesson. It has as an additional cost to cast the spell Waterbend X. And then it says exile X target creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. I basically included this here for exactly one reason, which is that Trent has been playing that Esper Blink deck at Hide on the Ceiling. The Spider-Man card that is blue X, exile any number of creature or artifacts and return them at the end of the next end step, was great for him and just looked like a card that you were just happy to have in your deck. This card, I think, is worse than that effect. The fact that you have other ways to pay for it is like nothing. But I think because this can't target opponents' creatures, it's not good enough. But I just want to like keep a closer eye on these kind of like short-term flicker effects as they get printed. Simply because Hide on the Ceiling looked so good for Trent when he played it. But yeah, I think this one's probably not good enough, probably not doing enough things, but I just thought it was interesting to talk about. Okay, now we have Ko, the Face Stealer. This is 4 black for a Shapeshifter Spirit. It's a 6/6. It says, when Ko enters, exile up to 1 other target creature, and then whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile it. And then Ko's activated ability is you may pay 1 life, choose a creature card, exile with Ko. And then Ko has all activated and triggered abilities of the last chosen card. So I have this in the I'm going to die to this at some point category because I'm not smart enough to figure out what the combos are with this card. I know that people have talked about maybe you could make infinite mana with like the Eldrazi that has an activated ability that makes a generic mana. And if you like reclone, you're a different instance of that ability, so you can like make a bunch of mana that way. I don't know. Maybe there's something you could do with the ooze combo, with like Phyrexian and Jester, I think is the card. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. But this text box is very unique, so I wanted to talk about it. It does cost 6, which is going to be a problem as well. It's probably just not good enough. But it is, I don't know, it is neat. Like it does feel like maybe there's something cool you could do with it, but I'm not going to be able to figure it out right here while talking to you. I did think about it a little bit before I started the set review when I decided to include it in the set review, but I just wanted to flag it as like, hey, this is a cool, unique card, and maybe someone figures out something to do with it eventually. Next we have Fated Firepower. This is a X red enchantment. It has flash, which is important. And then it says this enchantment enters with X fire counters on it. It says if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus an amount of damage equal to the number of fire counters on this enchantment instead. So this is another card without a home. Like currently there's no deck that you would obviously slot this into and say, oh yeah, I have done it. Like problem solved. But I do think that like maybe there's some kind of like funky like big red deck or something that can play this card, and it does have flash, which matters as well. So I'm like pretty intrigued by this card. They've printed a bunch of effects of this style before, of like make your instances of damage deal like 1 or 2 more damage. But I don't know the last time that they printed one that was like had flash, which is like kind of interesting. I think the reality is that the casting cost on this is just going to be a problem. Like paying 4 for an enchantment that just long term potentially enhances your damage is not it. I don't think. I think you really need to be paying 5 or 6 for this to really feel worth it. But I don't know. It's just kind of interesting, and I wanted to flag it. Like it's in the last section of the slideshow for a reason. But I do think it's cool. Next we have Firelord Azula. This is a 1 blue black red legendary human noble. She's a 4/4 and has firebending 2. And whenever you cast a spell while Firelord Azula is attacking, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is everything. So flash creatures are included in that ability, by the way. I think the big thing with Azula, and the reason why I have her in the I will die to this card category, is like Azula has big like Kess dissident mage vibes to me, where you look at this card and you think, man, the text box on this card is juiced. It's so good. So surely this card will be playable. And I think in practice, you just have this problem where you've got to play it on turn 4, then you've got to untap, then you've got to actually like get the value out of it. And in the case of Azula, you actually need to have something to play during combat while she's attacking, which, you know, some decks are going to have, but it's just too many hoops to jump through for it to feel worth it. The text box is great. Like the text box is really, really strong. And I think that if I'm going to end up in a situation where someone plays this and I can't kill it and I'm going to feel like I'm just going to die. But I think that the issue is with it is that it's just a bit too many hoops to jump through to actually get the value out of this card. Okay, and I think this is the last card I have in the set, somewhat thematic. This is the Cabbage Merchant, the iconic meme from the show. This is 2 and a green for a 2/2 human citizen. It says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, create a food token. And then whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, sacrifice a food token. And then it has the ability tap 2 untapped foods you control, add 1 mana of any color. So like, I don't know, this text box is pretty good. Like making a food every time your opponent casts a spell is not nothing. The fact those foods can then get turned into mana right away is pretty relevant as well. That's one thing that you can kind of sometimes run into trouble with. I'm just like envisioning, like, what if you get this going with like Academy Manufacturer or something like that, and you're really off to the races? I think that it is likely not good enough, but I would be remiss. Like, there are people who are trying to build these kind of like green, blue X game objects, decks, where they're trying to just make as many like clue tokens and food tokens, and they're trying to like, sack them to the, oh God, it's morning and my brain has not been good about cards this morning, but sack them to the blue black take extra turns card. Like trying to do things like that to win the game. And the Cabbage Merchant is definitely a card that helps with that plan. I think it would be really helpful if it made a food on ETB or something like that. The fact that it doesn't is like, Time Sieve. That's the name of the card. Sorry, I had to get it out of there. But I think if this made a food on ETB, it would be a lot better. It is probably going to make a food a lot of the times, even if they remove it. But the 2/2 body is pretty distressing, and also the negative text box is not something you're super interested in. Like the fact that if you don't block, you potentially lose some of your food, potentially a little bit problematic. But overall, I don't know. Cool card, very sweet. So I think that's it for me. Yeah, that's all the cards I had in this set. Let me know if you think I missed any. There were a few others that I had kind of on the fringes that I decided not to talk about. But all in all, I think this set is really cool. I do think that there are going to be some nice ones in this set, particularly like the cards that I think are in the format staple category for this set. I do think are going to be really good. I think that they're gonna meaningfully make some impact in the games, and you're gonna feel them. So let me know in the comments which cards you're most excited about. What are you excited to start building around? Fire Nation Occupation is the card that I'm gonna try and fit into a couple of decks probably right after this, or I'll be building decks. It's still pretty early, so I have some time. Without further ado, thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you like and subscribe, leave a comment about what cards you're excited for, and we'll see you next time.